Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the true leave of extreme metal podcasts. I am the death metal guy, aka Black Braid Liquor Cabinet GoFundMe.
Oh my god, support native struggles. And I am the black metal guy, aka Japanese style skunk cafe.
Oh no, I hate it. They're not descented, are they? Not like a pet skunk.
Not in Japan.
Of course not. Anyway, we've got a jam-packed show, so I'm going to skip most of the preamble, but I'm going to do some housekeeping because I've forgotten that the last couple episodes. First up, social media. Me, Death Metal Guy, Facebook, at Terminus Podcast. You, Black Metal Guy, Instagram, at Terminus Extreme Metal. Listeners, pay. Patreon, Terminus Extreme Metal Podcast, $3. Extra episodes, $5. Discord, anime memes, hot pictures of feet.
This is Josh from Defeated Sanity, and you're listening to Terminus Extreme Metal Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, round one, Gridlink, Coronet, Juniper, Willowtip Records. A record I was extremely excited for, as were, I think, a lot of you guys who are frequent listeners to the show. In the interest of not going for clickbait, short version, it's a masterpiece, and it may be Gridlink's best album. It's immediately one of the best of the year. Long version. Gridlink is a band that I've enjoyed for a long time. Like a lot of people, I got introduced to them through Longhena, which was their third and for a while final full length after Takafumi Matsubara, the primary guitarist, had I want to say a brain aneurysm or something to that effect that substantially hindered his ability to play guitar and required a really long physical recovery. But after a lot of years, Gridlink is back, and I anticipated that this would be excellent. I couldn't imagine that Gridlink would fail, given the stuff that the members had done in their spare time, like No One Knows What the Dead Think, and Takafumi Matsubara's solo project, Strange, Beautiful, and Fast. So I had little doubt that this was going to be phenomenal. And I'm really not disappointed. This really does... It does everything that was done so well on Longhena, which I think everyone can agree really was just the apex of Gridlink's career. The first two records, Orphan and Ambergray, are excellent, but Longhena is just clearly their best album. So I guess the most impressive thing about Coronet Juniper is that it managed to take what seemed like a perfect record in Longhena and perfect it further and pin down even more precisely what makes Gridlink so special. I'll get a little bit into where I think this falls musically, because I think I have a different answer to that than a lot of people would, but Black Metal Guy, were you exposed to Gridlink before I showed them to you? Like, you were already familiar to a pretty good degree, right?
I was already generally familiar. I'd heard some of it and thought, hey, this is really cool. And I'd seen some videos of him playing, maybe not Gridlink riffs, but playing his signature hyperspeed speed metal riffs in the course of his recovery. A friend of mine who was really into shred showed me them. Mm-hmm. And, it's very cool. I was excited for this record, and I'm, glad that he's back operating at peak capacity. I didn't have, like, a huge Gridlink background at all.
Oh, okay. So this will be, like, kind of your first full length with them.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll ask you your opinions, but I want to frame it in a certain way. So I'm going to make the argument that Coronet Juniper is the best screamo record of the year. Like, very much in the vein of something like Swarm, although obviously executed differently with an emphasis on different parts of itself. But now I'm going to spend the rest of the review walking that back and talking about how heavy metal it is, structurally and in terms of riffcraft. For those who haven't heard Longhena, this is really further iteration on that idea. These sorts of very fast, very technical melodic riffs that are really at their heart almost traditional heavy metal riffs. Or, as you said, like technical speed metal riffs. What this is the most unlike, in a lot of ways to me, is other grindcore, which is funny because Gridlink is known as this flagship sort of technical grindcore band. But I'm not sure that really fits. Sure, the songs are dense and short and very impactful and based off of just a few fundamental ideas. But I think there's a way you get to this record that can bypass Napalm Death entirely. I'm sure the guys in Gridlink love Napalm Death, but I think there's a way you get here without that. So where do you think this falls? In terms of, like, how would you describe it to... because I just feel like the grindcore label is a little bit of a misnomer.
I think it's right, but just in the most broad sense. I mean, bro, does it grind?
Mm-hmm.
It grinds, right? I think in terms of the screamo stuff that you're mentioning as an influence on it, that's undeniable. But whether you're talking about Swarm and Envy or other Japanese bands, or whether you're talking about, like One-Eyed God, Prophecy, or Orchid or whatever, right? All those bands had a pretty heavy grindcore influence, right? Or Page 99 or whatever, right? That's like the main screamo reference points are very grindy themselves. So I think, our standard, I get what you mean in that they're pretty much zero grindcore riffs on here. But we've talked many times about how there really isn't such a thing as a grindcore riff. Like, there are a few exceptions to that in bands that practice the style in a very pure and ascetic way, like Internal Rot, right? We're like, okay, that can't exist in any context other than grindcore. These are grind riffs. But generally, right, and I'm rehearsing shit for listeners who haven't heard it yet, but, like, generally speaking, we think of grind as about taking riffs from all over the map, right? From death metal, originally from death metal and crust punk and whatnot, and then stringing them together in specific kinds of song structures to produce a desired effect, right? It grinds. And that's one thing that gives it the chaotic, everything thrown in a blender feel. It has to do with pacing and sequencing and tempo. So there's... I think maybe what marks it as so different is he's doing the grind procedure on extremely different raw material. You might hear grind bands that have bits of melodeath thrown in, right? In various ways. Like what was... I remember people thought of... Was Sinus as unusually melodic for like a crust grind band or things like that.
Yeah.
But it is... And, you might hear melody by way of a bit of black metal or something. But the idea that the primary melodic material for the riffs is heavy metal, speed metal, and the most sort of elaborate melodeath and Swedish black death. That's pretty unfamiliar.
Yeah, I mean, you really get to the center of what's kind of my thesis statement about Gridlink at this point, which is that Gridlink is so remarkable because, well, amongst many things, but the most prominent thing is Takafumi Matsubara is such a genius-level guitarist that he is able to take, I believe, just like full melodies from other bands and recontextualize them in such a way that they belong to him specifically. Takafumi is technically a wizard, but more importantly, he understands how to write memorable melodies in such an intuitive way and in such a sort of casual, off-the-cuff way where he can just snatch something out of an At the Gates song, rework it slightly in his own idioms, and it's entirely new. Because you and I both noticed just tons of things across this record that either could be or just are nods to other music. I was talking to you the other night, and I said that there is a melody on this record where the riff is an interpolation of a vocal melody from the theme to Neon Genesis Evangelion, which it makes perfect sense for this band. I've
been rewatching it.
Oh, have you?
Yeah. With my girl. It's. You know.
Oh, also talk. I would like to say you have a great note in here about your conspiracy for the release date, which I think I believe.
Yeah, timed for the release of Armored Core 6.
Yes, because Gridlink is like a video game and anime band. It's great.
Gridlink understands what people listen to extreme metal for. Do they listen to it for flailing socio-political grievance? No, they listen to it for giant machines shooting lasers.
Oh, yeah. I love the art. I love the mecha with the lasers, and then if you look closely, you realize it's probably a miniature that they've taken a photo of.
Oh, that's sick.
That's so cool. I love that idea. And frankly,
I definitely don't own any Ava miniatures.
Yeah, I'd also like to say that Gridlink, it should not be a typical thing in extreme music, but they're like slick, hyper modern aesthetic. I really enjoy. I love all the sans serif typefaces, the neon colors. It's awesome.
Yeah, I like there's no sort of beating around the bush here. It's just like, yes, we know the music sounds like anime, and yes, it's about anime. It's not about anime. It's not dependent. It's not just like Evangelion themed, right? It's doing its own thing, but it's doing it in the same sort of cultural imaginary as anime, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to underscore what you're saying, because I really like that point you made. And if someone is listening casually, like as they try not to chop their finger joints off at the machine shop, they might have heard what you were saying as sort of a reiteration of the kind of thing I was saying. But you're making a really specific point, which is it's not just that Matsubara is lifting... it's not just that he's doing the regular grind thing, i.e. ripping off and lifting riff styles and arranging them in this original way, right? It's that the riffs themselves, when you zero in on the riffs, you can hear that they're in many cases almost literally borrowed from other bands, and yet they sound completely transmuted by his particular approach to writing and particular approach to, sort of phrasing and delivery. Right?
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely. And I'd also like to say that, the thing that's most impressive is that he's able to take such disparate ideas, recontextualize them, and then package them together into this totally unified aesthetic where a heavy metal riff next to a DSBM riff next to a grind riff next to an anime theme song sounds completely contiguous.
Yeah, and that is the grind thing. I mean, so it's like he's doing... Normally the grind effect is you borrow content and you give it a grindy form. Here he's doing that, but your point is that he's also grindifying the riffs themselves. He's acting on the content, the borrowed content, as well as the form, so that it all becomes thoroughly his, even when they're very elaborate hook melodies that might be a signature from another band. Like an At the Gates riff might be really heavy, but it doesn't grind. An At the Gates riff delivered by Matsubara grinds.
Yes.
And it sounds like his riff, even though note for note you might rearrange it and be like, hey, this is a sick part on Slaughter of the Soul.
Yeah, it is. If you want the quote for the sticker on the jewel case, it is, Coronet Juniper is a masterpiece of collage art, basically. Yeah.
Like the highest level on which one can grind.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like within the... Remember how I said, ad nauseum close the door on Disso Death? Gridlink kind of closes the door on anything in this vein except for another Gridlink record. They don't have a ton of competition, which is strange because people love this band. but it's almost impossible. How is anyone going to try to imitate this? This is just so masterful in its craftsmanship. I mean, this is the product of decades and decades of musical experience and songwriting knowledge. You can't do this listening at home.
And the years of recovery for him means that you can't. In a way, he has had the, disasters in the right hands can produce opportunities. And in a way, this is his second shot at a first album. Very often the first album has exponentially more years of writing in it than any subsequent record for a band. And in this case, it's been fucking 9 years, and you can guarantee even when he couldn't play, he was humming riffs and recording them. Yeah. It's he's had 9 fucking years. So in a way, as much life history has gone into this one record as into Amber Gray. Yeah,
it is. It is titanic in its scope in less than 20 minutes.
All right.
Let's grind.
Well, wait, sorry. You're going to say one more? Okay, no. Let's grind. So we've talked a lot about, we started with the thing that this is basically a screamo record, and then we've talked a lot about how it's like, how it relates to, how it also is a grindcore record, and how it relates to, its riffing source material. Now let's get back to the screamo thing. You can hear how, despite this grindy composition method and these riffs that are just epic heavy metal, this is, in terms of overall mood, quintessentially a screamo record, and in the sort of Japanese vein. So this is track 1 from the beginning, Silk Ash Cascade. So that riff that we faded out on, and that we also start on, that's a classic example of a metal riff that is, we've talked about this before, there are certain riffs that are metal riffs, right? That it could have been a Maiden riff, but the way it's delivered is specifically screamo and its close cousin, American metalcore.
Yeah, it's screamo thunderstruck.
Exactly. Oh, really nicely put. Yes. It's screamo thunderstruck, and it's you could hear it in an especially metallic part of a Thursday record. You could hear it in something like that with a different tone in like Darkest Hour, or even even the second Thrice record,
or Unearth. Unearth would do.
Unearth, yeah. So all of these classic sort of melodic metalcore bands and moments like that in. I mean, there's also, like, riffs basically like that in many of the screamo bands we mentioned at the beginning, but maybe a little less heavy metal. But yeah, that's a classic sort of high-stakes, anticipatory screamo riff. And then it sort of launches into something that you called while we were listening to it, like, the one kind of distinctive Gridlink riff there is. How would you describe that?
Yeah, so we'll hear it a few times on these samples, but it's a sort of tense minor key, but not really dark climbing chord progression, with either a sort of technical melodic fragment looping over it, or just like an octave matching climbing, like wailing trem guitar. That's a specific figure that gets used across the Gridlink discography.
So
it's a uniquely Takafumi thing.
So it's this kind of moving pedal point thing drawn from, which is similar to things in Melodeath or even in like Marduk or whatever, but here it's being used. Here this is his idiom, right? Is and over it there's some active guitar filling in that space, whereas say, I don't know, Marduk would certainly just like keep the pedal point on the root, and you know, the Melodeath bands might try to. The Melodeath bands might be less abstract about it. They'd try to fill in a melody on the rhythm guitar instead of putting it all in whatever crazy shit the lead is doing.
Yeah, it's he likes I think Takafumi likes having a sort of intense negative space between guitar lines. You know, he doesn't like intertwining leads so much as like a very deep rhythm guitar and a very high spindly lead.
That's a good point, and I really like that. It allows the two guitar parts to be genuinely distinct and interacting, as opposed to falling into the lead and rhythm pattern.
Yes, and it's also helped by Gridlink appreciates a sort of thin production. I think this is probably going to be the best produced album of the year. The drum production alone is fucking insane. In some of the just solo drum parts, the amount of body and tone color you get from the drums is spectacular. Obviously, the drumming performance is also just absurd. So Gridlink does appreciate their roots in this sort of, this is considered the spiritual successor to something like Discordance Axis, which I kind of agree with and kind of don't. But Discordance Axis was one of the flagship sort of white belt grind bands, which really means screamo grind. We just didn't know that at the time. But they always had an appreciation for a thin, grindy production. The guitars are strong, but they don't have what you would call a lot of heaviness or body to them. And it makes the musical soundscape very spacious because it's not getting clotted up with quite as much guitar saturation as you get from a regular metal record.
That's a very good point, and I would say for listeners, contrast that thin sound, deliberately thin sound from the just unbelievably beefy sound of other popular grind bands from that area, namely like Nazem and Rotten Sound or Pig Destroyer.
Yeah, those are trying to be.
And the thin sound here it's also a screamo thing. I mean, maybe Discordance Axis is getting it from their own place, but here it's a screamo thing that is. Although it sounds like Discordance Axis were white belt, right? So that's a screamo production convention.
Discordance was very screamo, but more kind of noisy, angular screamo.
Right. So the thin production is typical of that, and it's kind of a glassy. It brings it pretty close to a glassy tone, like you would get in post-punk. Post-punk or goth or anything like that, but it's being played in a much more aggressive way. But yeah, that's it, and it brings attention to the guitar texture and creates this more sort of, for a lot of the screamo bands, it can be a more sort of angsty and collapsing mood, or it can be sort of more ethereal. Yeah, but anyway, why don't we go to yours?
Yeah, sure. So we're going to go to the third track on this record and just listen to the whole thing. This is called Pitch Black Resolve. It's one of my favorites on the record. And here we're going to get back to a couple things. One being that this opens with the thing that I'm calling the Gridlink riff, that arrangement of like upward climbing chord progressions. But it's also going to touch on something that you pointed out, which is a proximity to American metalcore, which is, joined at the hip with screamo and is also very important to this band because there is just one of those incredibly greasy sort of pentatonic God Forbid, like a God Forbid riff or like a Lamb of God riff, like a new wave of American heavy metal riff, but played at a blinding speed that loses none of the inherent swagger. So yeah, let's listen to Pitch Black Resolve. This whole thing fucking rules. that like I never thought that Gridlink would play a riff that sounds like you're entering a pool hall in a movie from 2005. And there's a bunch of rough guys inside in leather jackets, but then they play it like 40% too fast, and it has a character all its own. I love the contrast of the ideas.
There's also crazy follow-through on it. Like, the riff actually has a very elaborate shape in a way that might be, you might not get from Pantera.
Yeah. It's got triple the notes of a Pantera riff, but
it's sort of like circle. It does this kind of circle. It's big stacked power, big like rising power chords that move in a kind of like in a sort of arpeggio circle or something.
Well, you pointed out a similarity to Skeleton Witch on the big Melodeath riff there.
Yeah. So that's after the big, after the throwdown bluesy riff. You get that. Yeah, the sort of more sort of beautiful, beautiful thrashing riff. That is, it's very influenced by Melodeath and Swedish Black Death, but it really sort of conspicuously thrashes in it rather that is sort of. It goes with the thinner production on this record. If you play those kinds of big Melodeath if you play a Melodeath riff and you chord it in a kind of black metal-y way, and you're playing it with screamo production, it's going to sound a lot like Skeleton, which is more sort of elegant moments. I'm thinking of like, I don't know how they sounded later. I'm just thinking of like Beyond the Permafrost.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you touched on, the sort of inherently American quality, because I want to touch on the fact that this is like very much an American band and a Japanese band rolled into one.
I think that's a very good point.
And they really sort of appreciate the furthest eccentricities of their respective regions. Things very unique to those places coming into collision in a really cool way. Something I also noticed, especially on your first sample, is the chord voicings that Takafumi is using are, because I was listening to them in the car today, they sound like The Carrier in a lot of ways. This sort of merging of melodic hardcore and screamo chord voicing. It's so fucking cool. But I want you to get more into the Melodeath, because we've got a great one on the next sample.
Well, I'm glad you got The Carrier in there. Yeah, that's a very good point. Super underrated band, because they played screamo chords or with like the elegance that they would be played in a black metal band, right? Just like really fully fleshed out melodies and harmonies.
But with also like just the sort of like knuckle dragging intensity of Hatebreed. It's so cool.
Oh yeah, on the mosh parts, for sure. So this next one, so basically like
the first
Pitch
half,
Black Resolve.
The first half of this record is like an unbroken chain of genius songs.
Yeah. Pitch Black Resolve ends, and then Nickelgrass Mosaic starts immediately. One aspect of grind writing is that the songs interact with each other far more than on any other kind of record. They're written together. So you think you just got done. You're like, oh shoot, the epic Melodeath part is over. Well, that's where you're wrong.
what a just a bear of a little tiny song. Jesus.
Yeah, that's a huge, tiny song. So, I mean, the balls it takes to lead with that riff. Like, as with the big sort of Lamb of God riff on the last song, he's so good at playing melodies that... He plays kinds of melodies that the first time you heard them when you were 15 blew your fucking mind.
Yeah.
Right? And
then you hate them for another 20 years.
Exactly. You grow older, and if you don't hate them, you allow them only in in specific contexts, right? You're like, okay, well, I like that for what it is, right? But that's like, it's Pantera, or that's silly, that's like fun, indulgent metalcore or whatever, right? You put them in their corner, and you move on to bands from Belarus who can't play their instruments. But like, he's so good at taking that just sort of massive Dorian chord progression riff and just Dorian sort of, it feels a little minor, a little pentatonic, and just through speed, through delivery, and through that sort of well-rounded, fleshed out form, the way it goes down the descent, just nailing it and reminding you why those riffs are actually great.
Yeah, and that Dorian melody, that really elaborate winding one, that's the one that's the fucking Neon Genesis Evangelion theme, because you can interpolate over it exactly, that song that people use in the meme videos, the dun 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 dun.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Dude, it's the same fucking melody. He's changed it slightly because I noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that the way he arranged it before I realized what it was, sometimes Takafumi will arrange these leads more like vocal melodies in terms of like how he's staggering the notes. They're not really played in a guitar idiom. They're played in a vocal idiom. And then I pieced it together with the notation, and I was like, the madman's done it. The madman's done exactly this.
Man, so also in terms of that huge riff, something that made me think of was Nagelfar, Sweden, which is technically Black Death, but, there's a spectrum from Black Death to Melodeath. It's really just one style, and we don't have a good name for it yet. But it's... The Nagelfar record, although it's sort of black metal, is as indulgent and, willfully fruity as any Melodeath record, and they'll totally do things like that, just like big... thick chords moving up a really epic progression, right? But yeah, anyway, just wanted to mention them, and that also links to one of the next riffs. Pretty quickly after that, the Skeleton Witch riff returns for a very similar one. That sort of nimble, muted and chorded riff. So he's not just linking the songs in an extremely meaningful way. He's also deliberately doing modular songwriting where riffs from other songs reappear later to unify the thing. And at the end, he does something that's really grindy. He hits this sort of lead, big low end lead, sort of death metal style single string trem, or something, and he just sits on the fragment, deliberately kind of stuttering it and winding up tension, and that's a very grindy thing to do.
Yes, it is. The most extreme grindcore stuff comes around the fringes in moments like that are used for very deliberate effect. But one more instance of Takafumi sort of appropriating material from radically different styles and repurposing it. We're going to go to the next song, Ocean Vertigo. This song is almost entirely based off of a DSBM riff. And Takafumi plays a bunch of different subtle variations of it that bring out different tone color and different chord voicings. I also want to say, just before I forget, that this record compares really strongly to the contrastic record Mammon that was my favorite of 2020. It's got the same sort of like futuristic, kind of sad emo metalcore grind thing. And I didn't think
exhilarating sadness.
Yeah, pure Ghost in the Shell shit. And I didn't think I would hear more of that until I heard this record. So let's listen to Takafumi just take a stock DSBM riff and make the coolest shit in the world out of it. Fuck music, man. I don't want to do this shit anymore.
This is a little one Gash, and you're listening to Terminus.
All right, and we are back from outfitting our mechs to discuss the new one from Sielunvihollinen. This is Helvetinkone, which translates roughly as Hell Engine, out now on Hammer of Hate, one of Finland's classics. So in a way, this is the new one, but we reviewed a couple other Sielun releases earlier this year. We reviewed the split with Sudden Tyval, which was actually 2022. But what we focused on was the Sielun Morskaya EP, which came out much earlier than this year, but was actually written after the material on this record, after the material on Helvetinkone. And it was an EP, and it was composed out of frustration with how long it took to get Helvetinkone out, right? Because of basically supply chain issues, which have been affecting record production all over, basically. So Sielunvihollinen was a bit of a departure from the recent direction of the band. It was more like their early material, but it was almost like, as you put it, like a more sort of modernized Impaled Nazarene.
Yeah.
Very quick, punky black metal songs, and with a lot of grinding riffs, but also extremely elaborate leads of the kind that Sielunvihollinen has become known for. But, when these are delivered at breakneck speed and in the context of, and with raw punky production, it sounds almost more like Emperor type stuff. So it's like Impaled Nazarene with more Norse and Finnish grandeur. Well, they are Finnish, but you know what I mean. The fancy Finnish stuff.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a departure. But Helvetinkone is, this is definitely not. Although this record has plenty of 1-2 hardcore beats and plenty of stomping oi passages, it really does not have the punkish feel that is core to Sielunvihollinen, and that was especially exaggerated on the last EP. It is more restrained, and in that sense it carries on a tendency that we heard in some of the songs on Teloitu Kaski, the 2021 one, which had a couple songs. Remember I described that one track as like Sunday afternoon in early spring in Helsinki?
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. It has tracks that have this kind of... they started to have these tracks that have this kind of like bleary-eyed, downcast, urban noir vibe. And this record, this newest one, Helvetinkone, carries that really, really far. It has whatever people often refer to something in the Finnish style that you hear maybe in Horna as a certain kind of sour riffing, right? Or you could maybe bitter if you like, depending on which kind of beer you prefer. But right, riffs that have kind of a wicked twist to them, and unexpected half steps in a way that's different from the evil and crushing unexpected half steps of the Norwegian stuff. And this is that tendency carried towards the fullest extreme. Also influenced a ton by Peste Noir, I think, that and literally the sort of the French decadent and noir film vibe that you get in a lot of his music. And by video game music, I think, which, the main man, Matthias, has never been shy about, as a core influence. This record is really soundtracky, and has very elaborate melodic riffs, and in some ways, I think we agree, is straining at the bounds of the black metal format, and especially the stomping Finnish black metal format. It's really good. There's outrageously detailed melodies with much more detailed rhythm guitar than we often get in Finnish stuff. Cool instrumental performances and a unique atmosphere. But let's get into trying to define what makes this weird. I mean, death metal guy, what did you make of it?
Agreed. This is an extremely weird record. I think I like it. I think that I like it maybe a lot, but I'm kind of struggling with, like, if there's something to say that this is coming up with musical ideas that I'm having a lot of trouble describing in a way that seems... in a way that would, like, I guess when you're a critic, you're trying to find ways to describe music, which is, of course, like dancing around architecture. But, hopefully with the idea that you can give the impression of what it sounds like to the listener or the reader or what have you. Here, that's really difficult to do. You can imagine this as a sort of black heavy metal fusion, and that is almost objectively true, but where your brain goes is completely wrong. You're not going you're not going into dissection. You're going more into like
right.
a pure love of early Judas Priest and like the first two Maiden records, combined with a level of black metal abrasion and aggressiveness that is a fascinating contrast, but I wonder if it's even necessary for these songs. This is one of the weird cases where I feel like this is pointing toward something. I don't want to use the word softer on principle because this is a metal podcast, but you get what I mean. Something, something closer to the 80s.
There are certain parts of this record that are very aggressive in the classic vein for this band and for black metal, and have an immediate physical energy to them. But they're the exception rather than the rule, and that's not by mistake, right? Mm-hmm. This is it's after something different, and often the blast beats and the stomping 1-2 beats and the screeching vocals seem kind of incidental to what's going on here. And I think what you're saying, death metal guy, I think you're right. It's unusual in a way that's hard to describe. This is extremely original music yet, mm-hmm. This is extremely original music, and wherever Sielunvihollinen is going, he hasn't quite got there yet. This is something original taking shape, and I think it's in the midst of the metamorphosis.
Yes, he's working out a new vocabulary for this style.
And I think it often feels like the kinds of melodies he's developing and also the kinds of atmospheres really are shackled by the format that this has to be driving 1-2 beat, blast beat, stomp. Mm-hmm. Like it's pushing towards something that has more of the kind of rhythmic freedom you could get in soundtrack music.
Yes. I would also suggest that maybe what we're seeing here, along with the other recent Sielunvihollinen releases, as well as the White Rune record that we covered a little while back, might be part of a process of Matthias sort of rediscovering stuff that he loved in his youth.
Yeah.
So White Rune is almost this like unabashed love letter to early Emperor and early Dimmu Borgir, I think,
Cradle of Filth.
And Cradle of Filth. Very, the kind of stuff that you would listen to as a young guy in metal. Matthias is a little bit older than us. It was more contemporary for him, but same idea. Additionally, beyond that...
I think he's actually not much older than us.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Like another, maybe a weird thing. So this does sound like Impaled Nazarene still, but it actually sounds a lot like the Impaled Nazarene with Alexi Laiho in it, which was like a 1 or 2 album period where Alexi from Children of Bodom was sort of filling in. And I'm wondering if maybe just more directly Children of Bodom is kind of an influence here. A band that we never talk about, but are really important to Finnish metal in general.
We talked about it once when that Morgal record came out.
Oh, yeah.
But I would not be surprised if that were an influence here. That makes a lot of sense. Anyway, since we can't describe it, let's get to the samples. This will get to some other aspects of the atmosphere here. This is just first 2 minutes of the record. This is Sineti Ya Symboli. well, I fucked that one up, dude. I need to reintroduce the sample because I'm at the second track. Is that possible? If not, we'll just use this sample.
No, how about I just bolt in, how about we just listen to the second one now, and we'll just switch the order around.
Oh, word. Did I have the, let's see. Oh, I was looking... That's right. I was looking at the wrong notes. There we go. Okay. So wait, if I introduced... We're actually good, dude. Because I can just do... I fucked up, man. I was looking...
Symboli, yeah.
Yeah, I was looking at the notes under it. Now, here we go. Okay.
Okay, that's
ready
fine.
to go.
All right, go for it.
Okay, so we open with this really ornate neoclassical riff, like an overture. Da, 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 and that has this cool harmony, moving kind of independently from the main melody. And if you were if it was delivered in a different way, like there are riffs like that were on the last EP, or riffs like that you could maybe hear on the White Rune record, right? Mm-hmm. It could sound like, grim, awe-inspiring evil castle music, right? Yeah. But then in this context, it's a little different. It's sort of restrained, and we hit then this rhythm part that's in a way a classic Finnish thing, right? Do-cha, do-cha. Mm-hmm. Stomping mid-tempo, chorded rhythm part. And the rhythm chords really sound like DSBM, don't they?
Yeah, they do, and that's a thing that I'll touch upon later, is Sielunvihollinen's relationship with DSBM, which is always sort of like murmuring away in the background.
Yeah, not so much on the early stuff, although maybe more than I realized. But like, certainly on this record, it's really upped. And although those chords could also sound like Horna, they sound like Horna on Envatnag's F Los Solfus, blah, 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 which has a lot of DSBM in it. I mean, even Sano Yesi has a lot of DSBM in it. And so there's this very different mood at play. And we end up pretty quickly. I mean, gosh, we were just fucking talking about this with Gridlink, but we end up with alternate soundtrack to Ghost in the Shell, right? And we get this. The song, it regains its sort of gothic intensity towards the end, right? You get this crazy flam drumming, but the lead, the main melody is just this sort of like downward spiraling lead that sort of shifts between phrases by half steps, right? Everything is sort of like, all the intervals are narrowed and slinky. And if it resembles black metal, it's, again, like, I don't know, it reminds me of like Hakuja, which is Japanese DSBM and highly soundtracky. But Hakuja sounds more like black metal on average than this record does. Yeah. And this part is, and I don't mean that as an insult to this record, it's just after something different. I'll try to develop that distinction a little further on this next one. Did you have anything else to say about that sample in particular?
No, I guess I wanted to say something a little bit more meta about Sielunvihollinen. I guess if there's like a primary thread that follows through this band from the more like traditionally black metal material to this, it's a real emphasis on directness in songwriting. Not in the sense that it doesn't have subtlety or complexity, but in that it really has no interest in anything tricky or mysterious or even necessarily unanticipated. It's after something very specific and direct, and it wants to communicate it to the listener in a very plain spoken way. Which I think is interesting. It sort of runs counter to a lot of natural impulses in black metal to mystery and sort of like confounding weirdness. Sielunvihollinen has no interest in that.
That's a good point. I mean,
A guy on our Discord, right, grouped Sielunvihollinen as a sort of street black metal band. In that, and that has to do with the Oi and RAC influence, obviously, but also the specific atmosphere, right? It's city music, and it's very grounded, right? It has this sort of, craftsman-like directness. I mean, there's a simplicity and directness to Horna, right? But there's a lot of mystery there. Horna's an extremely mysterious band.
Yeah, Horna's about alchemy and shit. No way, man.
Exactly.
Sielunvihollinen isn't writing anything about fucking alchemy. That's nerd shit.
Right,
we don't do that.
Right. The classic Sielunvihollinen song was about, beating someone's ass on the back streets, right? Tamakansa, Tamama, or whatever, right? And this stuff is still very street and very urban, but in a really different way. So here we're going to go to track 2, which is Raivoni Astalo, and this is structured as a ripper, right? It's paced as a ripper, in that it has that hardcore beat and the oi stomp, and you get some echoes of the old Sielunvihollinen feel, but melodically, again, it really wants to go somewhere else. Let's check it out.
At the end there, that's like an NWO-BHM thing.
Do you mean the lead or the rhythm part?
The lead, and especially using the lead as a rhythm is like a very early 80s NWO-BHM thing. Before the shape of the heavy metal riff was perfectly defined.
So do you mean kind of vamping with the lead?
Yeah, vamping a little bit with the lead, not really, before there were rules, before the rhythm guitar was there to do chords. There was still holdover stuff from 60s and 70s rock that hadn't leached its way out yet. And he's sort of rediscovering some of those ideas here.
And what I wanted to talk about there is the really active rhythm part, which is doing straight up counterpoint, independent rhythm. And so you can hear at the rhythm riff there has two versions. The first, we get the descending chord progression under those wheedly-woodly British heavy metal leads. Get descending chord progression leading to a crunchingly nasty resolution, which echoes the stompy chords that we heard earlier in the song. And then the second iteration, it turns around in almost for the first time on the record in the sort of burly, epic, wide intervals we associate with Finnish black metal. And it does it at light speed. Suddenly the rhythm part accelerates past the lead. And we get right? It's this huge sort of Rama-Lama moment. And at that moment, you hear some of the, like, stomping skinhead energy you get in the old stuff. But it's the counter melody, right? And the main mood, if you follow the mood in that vamping heavy metal riff, or in the sprawling atmospheric part that hit before, right? The do-do-do-do, right? The main mood isn't fight brawling, it's trying to light a cigarette in the rain.
You know what the thing is about this record, what makes it so weird is all the emphasis is placed in very odd places. Like it's like listening to someone speak English, but periodically they're not mispronouncing something, but they're emphasizing the wrong syllable in a word, and it suddenly makes it very unfamiliar. You know what they're saying, but it's just very strange the way it's been constructed. Like, I've got a really good example of that on my next sample, but I think that's a thread that goes through this whole record. Like, for instance, something I'll point out, I don't know if we've necessarily sampled an exact point of this, but there's parts of this record which are extremely vocal-driven, to the point where the riff underneath it will essentially just be sort of a rock chord structure. But the vocals are still delivered in this, like, sneering, spitting black metal style. And that's almost the weirdest thing about it. Like, I can imagine this record with semi-melodic vocals, and it almost intuitively makes sense.
I think I'm hearing the same thing as you, but coming from a different angle. To me, it often sounded like there was so much melodic work done by these huge leads, and the focus was so much more on this sort of bitter and pensive atmosphere that I sort of thought, why have vocals at all?
Yeah.
But those might go together, right? I mean, I could see a record that doesn't default to the aggressive vocal format, and then has some, in certain places, has vocals in a sort of, semi-clean, kind of more Motorhead approach, or something like that. Yeah, I could really see that.
So I'll get to my first sample, just because I want to, before we forget, I want to touch on that idea of, like, emphasis in strange places. So this is Ve Centrala, and it hinges on a lead idea that is pursued very insistently throughout the song. Whenever a musician is spending a lot of time on a single melody, they're trying to communicate something with that. They're trying to say that this is sort of the center of the song. But I can definitely say that a lead like this as the central motif of a black metal song hasn't been done before. But if we go back to the mid-'80s, maybe we get something closer. So, yeah. What a strange lead to base so much of the song off of. But if we go back to NWOBHM, we see stuff that's immediately comparable. You know, or maybe not even NWOBHM, but like I was saying before, Children of Bodom. The idea of hinging a heavy metal song off of a sort of straightforward pop hook almost, but with a more minor key chord progression is interesting. And that's like a holdover from older styles.
It reminds me of also just like big mainstream Euro metal. Mm-hmm. Like, kind of reminds me of like Scorps.
I was about to say Scorpions, yeah.
Big city nights. I mean, the vibe is completely different, right? Big City Nights is about like trying to find more hookers and blow, but they're like all there already, forcing themselves on you.
This is more like Medium City Sunrise, you know?
Medium City Sunrise, right? There were no hookers and there were no blow, at least not of the kind you were looking for.
It was just black coffee and a cigarette while walking to work.
Exactly. Yeah. Oof.
Yeah. So we take that lead and we dump directly into a really sophisticated Satanic War Master riff. Which is one of my favorites on the record. It's inherently fucking awesome. It's the reason we all listen to Finnish black metal. But then it goes into another, even more purely NWOBHM passage with that little pentatonic run, that little there's almost a funk to it. Mm-hmm. And then he harmonizes the fucking thing, as you would back in '85, because of course. You know, it's at once immediately familiar if you've got a long historical knowledge of metal, but immediately alienating because of the way it's structured in the song. He's using these very not flashy, but sort of like insistent and cool guy swaggering melodies in an almost ironic way, you know, counterpointed by the sort of like depressed, sort of anhedonic chord voicings underneath. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, there's even something. There's a kind of what's I gonna say? Like the way that contrast. You know, there's a lot of swagger in the tandem lead, right? You know, it drops from the Satanic War Master thing into the really swaggering heavy metal riff, and the solo section. And there's this really cool rhythmic stutter he does that sets us back up for that sort of like vamping but really sort of tense heavy metal riff. There's like this you could hear some irony in that. You finish the tandem guitar solo and then quick back to shit, did I forget the keys? So, and this song is one of the more straight-ahead bangers, right? Really, like, here, this is a very sort of brisk and high-energy whole sample, even though it has more of the sour mood to it. This is, you know, you can get, but here, the Satanic War Master riff really is the exception that confirms the rule. And that works on the level of the album as a whole, too. If you want just, like, a bangin' anthemic Finn Black song, Alchemistia Tu Hoa is that for you. Mm-hmm. That's track 3. It's a fucking banger, but we're not even it might be like, you know, maybe it's the best song, but it's like on a different record. Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's there for the fans. Yeah. And here, the Satanic War Master riff, it's really skillfully done because of the rhythmic timing, but it's almost a quote, either of Satanic War Master or of Goat Moon's Immortal's Winter.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, it sounded like it's just such an intensely, classically Finnish riff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. It is a classically Finnish riff, and I think what you're picking up on is like the odd syncopation. Mm-hmm. It hits it's a classic melody hitting in places you don't expect. It's that shift of emphasis thing you were talking about. Yeah. But
so speaking of shift in emphasis, let's go to my last sample, where we're gonna loop back around and touch back on that DSBM quality. Sielunvihollinen's always had this sort of undercurrent of DSBM, or at least an affection for it. And I would argue that there's almost that sort of affection for DSBM in nearly all Finn Black. Like, Sargeist sounds sort of DSBM, just in the way it works melodically. But what's really impressive about this track, which is like primarily a DSBM track, is that it's still staying in constant contact with all those lead guitar theatrics and maidenisms that are making up whatever this new thing is. Now, clearly everything there is DSBM, at least obliquely. It's... what it really sounds like is Total Self-Hatred, which makes sense because Total Self-Hatred is the most Finnish DSBM band. It is purely Finn Black and purely DSBM simultaneously. And if there's something Sielunvihollinen's very invested in, it's being particularly Finnish. And I like how it comes out here. And I like that, Matthias is taking the time to just present a full-fledged DSBM track. That undercurrent is present on, basically all of his music in Sielunvihollinen to some degree or another, but I like hearing it bear fruit fully here.
Yeah, dude. It's something worth noting is just how authentic the sort of plotting arpeggio part.
Oh yeah,
where you have these broken arpeggios that are fully allowed to echo. It's kind of a rare moment where you hear Sielunvihollinen experimenting just with tone in space, right? These echoing arpeggios are so authentic to the DSBM tradition, and there was that one part, like when he ran through the sequence once at the turnaround, he does this brightening major chord at the very top, right? That's just like a sign that he is immersed in that form, right? It's like, oh yeah, this is a real DSBM passage. So I guess, where do we go from here?
Man. Either back into bins of dusty, forgotten NWO BHM 7 inches from 1984, or into the future in parts unknown.
come, the people must be told. So shall it be written, so shall it be done. Came the warning from the prophet, and it came to pass before the rising sun. He looked upon the thousands that had come to hear him speak. He warned them of the darkness of their evil and their greed. Somehow they ignored him, though their faces filled with fear. So he turned away and shed a single tear. So shall it be written, so shall it be done. Came the warning from the prophet, and it came to pass before the rising sun. Words had gone unheeded, nothing more that could be done. He returned into the mountains from where he had begun. Now he watches from the heavens as the void is drawing near, and the prophet's words are ringing all too clear, all too clear, all too clear.
So I've got this theory, or not a theory, it's sort of a reality that I think everyone listening to this show will understand, that like ever since 2020, really since the show started, everything's been getting worse. I'm in a particularly sour mood over the last few weeks. I'm stressed, I'm overworked, I got a lot of irons in the fire. But the bigger sticking point is like weird interpersonal problems, sort of social problems I'm having with people. And not just the usual friction, but behavior on the part of people I know that's just so weird it almost seems alien. And I think that has something to do with, like, the movement of Western culture ever since the year of the rat. Everything's getting shittier, but not in the sense that everything's collapsing. It's just sort of sick. All the streets that I drive down have more potholes than before. Food tastes worse. Worse quality ingredients are being used. Interactions with people are just fucking weird. People are doing bizarre shit that doesn't make any sense, and they act like it's completely normal.
Multiple people that I know have just lost it.
Yeah, I am losing friends because they're just starting to become completely unhinged. And it's happening with such frequency, you have to do some self-critique and be like, am I part of the problem? Because I feel like I'm in a fever dream when I interact with people now. Everything is melting, and everything's getting worse, and it doesn't really have a source. It's just sort of poisoning itself. And it's been like that for going on 4 years now. When I was younger, I used to listen to a lot of odd stuff in my depressive phases, which still exist but are a little more controllable now. I would listen to, DSBM and stuff like that, but I'd also listen to a lot of brutal death. And listening to certain stuff like Mortician or Enmity gave me a feeling of real nihilistic hopelessness that sort of resonated with me and helped me get through hard times, as weird as that sounds. Trichomoniasis with Makeshift Crematoria, out now on New Standard Elite, is like a perfect recreation of those feelings. And I listened to it 5 times yesterday, and it was exactly the sort of not curative, but symptom-controlling medication that I needed to get through another day of bullshit. Trichomoniasis plays noise, brutal death, gore grind, very much in the vein of Last Days of Humanity, Enmity, the Mexican Disgorge, maybe Pustulated, Neanderthals, stuff like that. Stuff really on the fringe. Definitely functioning more like a noise record than a metal record, or at least a heavy metal record as we would understand it. There's nothing I can say about this record that will convince people who aren't into this, but I think it's brilliant, not merely in its extremity, but as a sort of atmospheric piece, because I think the things that I was describing about the world we find ourselves in are very important to this band, and I think they feel a similar way. And there's an expression of emotion on this record of a mingled rage and anxiety and confusion and paranoia that feels very appropriate for the present moment. Maybe a strange thing to say about an ultra extreme brutal death record, but there's something very now about this, and I think that it couldn't have come out at a better time. So, Black Metal Guy, what do you think of Trichomoniasis?
Vroom, 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 vroom. No, it's sick.
There's the review, ladies and gentlemen. The completely accurate description of it, by the way.
Yeah. It's I can hear the similarity to stuff like Enmity, but Enmity has, well, it has riffs. They're not melodies, but there are riffs,
yeah.
Right? Or you also compared this in texting to me. You also compared it to Concrete Winds, right? Concrete Winds is nothing but riffs, right? Mm-hmm. Even though they're all just the most horrible and anti-musical riffs ever written.
Yeah.
This is not organized around riffs. There are probably things you could isolate as riffs, but they're operating so much faster or slower than their usual versions that you won't register them as such. Mm-hmm. Kind of like that Knitting record we talked about recently.
Yeah. A lot of people have been comparing these two records very directly.
Yeah, a lot of people in the YouTube comments, right? But pinch harmonics as just it's just another kind of chord, right?
Yeah.
It's not an accent. It's like one of the main kinds of chords. Pretty much almost if you're going to be playing a melodic note, it's actually a pinch harmonic. Something that's not a chug, I mean. Sorry, that was my power unit just collapsing because everything in the world is getting worse. But onward. So, other than that, like comparisons from within, aside from Concrete Winds, comparisons from Black Metal universe, maybe Tetragrammaticide.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, Tetragrammaticide is like secretly a brutal death band.
Yeah, Tetragrammaticide and like Antichrist Kramer noise music.
Yeah, Intolerarian or something.
Yeah, yeah. It's Tetragrammaticide is very brutal death, but in a very different way from something like a Partiva or whatever, mm-hmm. Right? And it's It's Tetragram. It's very brutal death, and it has a lot of just blown out, muddy low end. This is to really to enjoy this record requires being just immediately into the textures,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so for the death metal guy, that's a no-brainer. For me, it's cool, but to get something out of this record, I actually really have to listen intently to the song structures. And, appreciate it more on a conceptual level. But it is awesome. And, the fact that it's not for me is part of why it's cool. It's completely uncompromising.
It's definitely, this style has become a sort of niche unto itself that I think is slowly getting more recognized as its own thing. Because chances are a lot of this is improvised, or at least written and recorded on the fly over a drum track. But I think that essentially, you talked about listening intently to the song structures. There are sort of organizing principles that operate at a very high level on this record, sort of like across multiple tracks. This seems to be a record built out of suites of 2 or 3 clusters of songs in a sort of a grindcore manner. But there is a strange feeling of like very abstract narrative being produced over the course of it.
And on some songs, individual songs, you can even get it too, like on one of my samples. It's hard to... This is in some ways very original, boundary-pushing music. It's hard to imagine a new form that is sort of... it's hard to imagine a new form that more people than the death metal guy can enjoy coming out of this record in particular. But some records are building a new style and others are more like kind of wrecking balls. And this record kind of explodes any remnant of brutal death metal convention or, Lords forbid death metal convention, right? that is left in this songwriting, right? This is now a self-contained way of doing business, like extreme guitar noise, but like not Skullflower.
Yeah.
Although I think the guy from Skullflower would like this. So this is it's pretty wild. And I totally get what you mean about this being a very now record. I mean, the lyrics are or the song titles, right? I mean, fuck if they're lyrics, but
probably not. Yeah.
Song titles hint at that for sure. You've got things about like reverse transcription, polymerase chain reaction, right? So that's about RNA transcription methods. You've got, Makeshift Crematoria, which was a headline circulating for a while.
And the sample on the second track where they use that, I believe, is probably coverage of, like, in the middle of COVID, probably in India.
Yeah, they're stacking the bodies. Oh, I mean... I think they said similar things about the U.S. too. Or they were not crematoria, but they were stacking the bodies outside the hospitals. There's a lot of medical language throughout this, but in a kind of different way from the Carcass way.
Yeah, I mean the second track being called "The Viral Underclass" seems pretty pointed.
Yes, this is much more about the horror is not you look to the medical textbook for examples of hideous accidents or injuries or just representations of the body in extremis. It's more like the horror, it's not like using the medicine to get to the horror. The horror is more medicine itself.
Yeah.
There's definitely some sort of body horror, panic gore stuff on here. Like one of my tracks is a crazy title that seems to be about cancer, but a big part of the horror is sort of biotechnological control through the medical apparatus.
right?
Yeah, lots of description. It's a lot of it's about like viral transmission and things metastasizing, growing out of control.
If you like Deleuze or Agamben or sort of the cooler Foucault stuff, right? This record has a lot of that. I think.
I don't drink wine. I don't know what any of those are. Anyway, so I thought that was a good bit. I don't know.
No, that was good. But my God, I couldn't. You just vaporized me. I try to never mention that shit on this show, but like, it seemed relevant.
No, that's fair. Because
you know what it is? There's a certain kind of listener who's like, oh, I don't know about all this conspiratorial shit, but you name some French theorists and they're on it.
Yeah. Well, no, I think you are pulling on something here, which is like, this is like clearly intellectual music.
Yes.
In its own weird way. I wrote it in the notes. I'm not going to harp on it, like the whole brutal death or this sort of like noise gore stuff as high art. Like, it just is, and like, you're either there for it or you're not. I think I'm kind of done peddling that to people.
Sure. You've proved your thesis.
It's been established. And this is like, maybe this is like one of the most triumphant examples of it. It is exactly what it is, and it is also, almost academic in its nature. So let's just play what it sounds like. I'm going to play 2 tracks just together, because on a record like this, where they're structured in suites, the process of listening from track to track is a very important part of it. So we're going to listen to Involuntarily Sterilized, The Uterus Collector, and Hinged Operculum. And this is what the record sounds like pretty much the entire time. So yeah, it sounds like Noism, it sounds like Encenothrok, it sounds like all those things, but the thing that gets me about this record is there's a sort of feeling of panic to it.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of stuff in this vein sounds, overwhelming and dominant and cruel and insane and all those things. Trichomoniasis sounds like terrified. You know, there's a strange intersection of being the predator and the prey at the same time. And something about that is so, like, anxiety-inducing, and, like, there's a real oppressive quality to this music. Like, it's super dark. Like, that Cadaverosity record that we covered a few months back was kind of similar. It's like, man, this is, like, noisy and incoherent. Why do I feel so bad and, like, attacked in a way that I don't from other stuff? It might be the sort of unhinged improvisational thing, but I think a big part of it has to do with just the scope of the record. This is 36 minutes long, which is unimaginably long for a record like this. That is operating at ridiculous timetables. You know, Last Days of Humanity's Putrefaction in Progress, which is like their apex, is a 25-minute record. The Enmity record is long, but Enmity kind of fades into the background and becomes this meditative thing when you listen to it for a long time. This is really in your face and demands your attention and just doesn't stop for almost 40 minutes. And the endurance test aspect of it, and the ability to start picking apart broad movements over the course of multiple songs, is part of the experience. It's supposed to be this grueling thing that you undergo, and I really like it. I think the idea of bloating this shit to almost 40 minutes is incredible. We should operate on a bigger scale. I hope their next album is a fucking double album. I hope it's 2 CDs. I hope it's 2 fucking CDs of this. And you lock people in your
splatter
apartment.
Vinyl. If you make it splatter vinyl, people will buy it.
Yeah, a 4 LP. And you lock people in your garage, and you make them listen to the whole thing. And they come out changed for better or worse, I think.
Well, the locking in garage and making them listen, that's definitely part of the noise thing. I think Boyd Rice literally... Was that Whitehouse or Boyd Rice who literally locked people in the venue?
I think Whitehouse tried to do that several times early on, I believe.
There was a Boyd Rice thing also where he made the crowd look directly, and he turned the stage lights on the crowd.
Oh yeah, and he
the
forced them to. Yeah, I remember that one. Boyd Rice rules. So this is. So what I find interesting is that yes, this is incredibly abrasive timbral music that is mostly improvisational, and yet over the process of listening to it, things start to etch themselves out. Like, certain broad ideas start to congeal and take form, and it's never clear enough for you to fully understand it, but that's kind of part of the horror of this record, is, like, recognizing patterns but not being able to describe them.
Yeah, well, I got one real quick. Like, the basic riff form here really is... which you could hear pretty clearly at the beginning and end of that sample. And it's a good example of, like, the slide and the pinch harmonic, and really kind of both at once. Sliding pinch harmonic as a basic riff unit.
The horrible woofing slides, just like the string sounds going off constantly. They're just like gunshots going off the whole time.
Yeah. Constant panic music. It really does take ways that we all feel bad all the time. The sort of omnipresent. We talked about this a little bit in a different way with that. God, what was that? That very unusual and cool sort of symphonic black metal with the sort of goth indie undertone that we did. It was talked about a while ago. with the Water in the Cemetery song, right?
Yeah.
Shroud of Despondency.
Yes.
Shroud of Despondency had it too in a different way, right? I talked about how, like, they sort of capture the omnipresent tension of this moment, right? All the different lines of tension running through us. This record does that, but not in tension mode, in constant panic mode, right?
Yeah,
it takes those lines of paranoia, anxiety, and sort of uncertainty and just fear, and it takes them and it cranks them to acute concentrations and just forces your face into them.
It's weird because it's all like regular anxieties, but they're compressing a month worth of them into like a 2-minute song.
But a lot of them aren't regular, right? Because it's also just, I think, any us and anybody who's listening to this show probably is also suffused with world historical paranoia and the continuous fear that, you know, new friends will somehow, you know, go insane. And,
Yeah,
you know,
and turn on you.
Turn on them. Exactly. Yeah. Who's going to go insane and turn on me next?
Yeah, I've been asking myself that question lately.
Yeah. I mean, the isolation broke some people, and we're not gonna fully understand that for years and years. But it's just, and it's happened to my friends too. People close to me have had friends turn on them in that way too. It's just bizarre.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, there's all sorts of, you know, or you know, you're like, great, what's on the news? How is the shit going to continue hitting the fan?
Yeah.
How could it hit the fan faster? There's all these kinds of anxieties that really have been ramping up since about 2015, but are now fever pitch and are mixed up with the everyday anxieties about, like, shit, how am I going to pay the bills? And, you know, did I forget my keys?
Yeah, it's and almost the conflict between these like high level anxieties and low level ones. They merge and they're spit out in these weird ways. I don't know. Play another fucked up song.
Yeah, cool. So in terms of like, I mean, what I wrote in the notes for this one is, for some reason this one stood out to me. But if I had to tell you to listen for something, it would be more of that sort of basic riff form, which if you trace it far back enough really is thrashing death metal. And at the end of the sample, but I probably earlier than that too, you'll hear something that sounds like slow Morbid Angel riffs played very fast. So this one is imbued with senescence.
If these guys went to Nepal and hooked up with Kolkata Inner Order and they started a project together, would the world just fucking end?
Is that the end of the review? That was just such a good one-liner. Anyway, the we like to try to figure out when to leave it on a cool line. But anyway, so that part, now I remember why I picked it, because it was built around these just gut-busting breakdowns. And the breakdown instrument, the technique they're using is just these pick scrapes. The breakdown is one note, but the one note that keeps repeating is like 4 notes smeared together, and it's just a sort of scrape.
And it's delivered in this bizarre timing where it's like limping along, like a hair past where the note's supposed to hit. It's nothing is clean on this record. Everything is deliberately offset.
It's like literally knuckle dragging.
Yeah.
Like it's dragging its knuckles. But it's also just very heavy. There are breakdowns on this record and big rhythmic parts that are much more sort of heady or just panic-inducing. Mm-hmm. This one is... These are fun. They are aggressive. That first one is just a crushing minimal breakdown, and you could hear people exporting that technology, that particular kind of scraping breakdown riff, or slam riff. I guess in some sense it's a slam, but it's simpler than a lot of slams.
This record in its slower, kind of more slamming moments sounds a lot like Astral Tomb.
Oh, Astral Tomb does do those.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear that. And the cool thing is it just hangs there on one note. It doesn't even have a fancy slamming rhythm. And then the way it accelerates is so... Both of us cackled during the sample, where it just goes with this flyaway blast riff with this horrible seesawing pinch harmonic. Some of those things remind me of Cryptopsy.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, Blasphemy Made Flesh would have stuff like that.
But at the end, I think you could hear it. You have another one of those sort of convulsing blast chug riffs with those seesawing pinch harmonics, and some of those sound like the pinch and bend-based doomy Morbid Angel riffs being played really, really fast. Does that make sense?
No, definitely. Like the slowest stuff off Blessed Are the Sick. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's still kind of untapped potential for a lot of death metal bands. I think people are just starting to realize, like, the slow parts of Morbid Angel aren't just heavy, they're truly weird and unsettling. And there's, like, a whole language that you can derive from those that probably has something to do with, like, what some of the really weird down-tempo bands or, like, deathcore bands are doing, like Humanity's Last Breath or something. There's some sort of common DNA there. So let's do another one. Predacious Stylet. When I heard this, I could not fucking believe they did this. Because shit just happens on this record. Like, just unprovoked antagonism happens. And no, it's awesome. So I really love...
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. That's a good it's a good description.
Yeah, it's like there's nothing to justify, like, doing this to us. It's just weird and mean. So I really love Neanderthals, which are a brutal death band that are known for... using bass only, but specifically like an almost completely undistorted bass, which is just one of the weirdest fucking things that you've ever heard. I think it's awesome. It's totally unlistenable. Predacious Stylet is just the drums and the vocals, and the regular guitar has been replaced with a twanging lead guitar that a twanging clean guitar, that appears to be sort of vamping on sort of like Chinese folk melodies or something like that. But really I just want to play it because this opportunity to hear the timbres is so weird and fascinating. Like, to be able to hear the fried edges of the vocal distortion, or to really hone in on the sine wave form of the kick drum. It changes the way you interact with this music, and it somehow sounds like even fucking worse than the rest of it. that one sounds the most like the album art.
Yeah.
It's one of the
wormy,
worst sounding fucking things I've ever heard. Just genuinely, that's just an atrocious thing to hear. It bothers me. They're taking the clean guitar and then they're periodically just pitch shifting it way down so it becomes a sub bass frequency. I wondered for a second if they were like, they recorded it normally, but they forgot to put on the distortion patch in their DAW, and it just rendered like this. And they were like, no, fuck it, that's cool. I mean, yeah, why not? We'll just have one without any distortion.
At points it sounds like things I've heard on experimental guitar records, but like...
Yeah, like Fred Frith or something.
Yeah, exactly. Things played by friends that, like, I've never gone and actually listened to, but that are fascinating when you hear them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some of that. I mean, I didn't really hear the... Well, the Chinese might be offended by that characterization of their folk music.
Well, there's some weird chord phrasing that points to East Asian stuff, although listening closer on headphones now instead of my car stereo at deafening volume while I scream, it does sound almost more like John Zorn, like free jazz stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you mean, though. There is extremely weird intervallic choice and probably like semitone shit in Chinese folk music, right?
Yeah.
It's just... I think I hear it. It's definitely in the avant-garde jazz and experimental mode. But like, so the other thing they're pitch shifting is the vocals, but they do it in a different way. It's not just like the vocals are sort of, it's not just, oh, he has gutturals and they're at a set shifted pitch. It's used dynamically. And so there will be parts of the music, there was on the last sample too, where the vocals will just drop another octave, or you'd be like, what the fuck is that sound? And it's the vocals. And they basically, usually when you get sub bass in say a slam or brutal death record, right, it's for the sub bass drop. Or it's a function of sustained guitar and bass tone. Like you're getting a little bit of sub bass. This is just, they create their own sub bass level whenever the vocals want to dive under the guitars. And the vocal tone is awesome. The gutturals, these are sick gutturals, and the way they're being manipulated is really effective. And so it gives you the somatic heaviness of the sub drop, but it's sustained, and instead of really just sitting at the very bottom of the mix, it's kind of also everywhere, in a very disconcerting way. And
well, it's
so
also,
much of.
Well, I was just gonna say it's also a mechanism of how there's zero effort made to create any sort of rhythmic structure vocally. It's just sort of ranting and roaring constantly over everything. It just this sort of like incoherent mess of like attacking noise. I love it.
It's the other thing is that insofar as there's a melodic idea in that passage, it's just strobing.
Yeah.
It's just like the idea is simply Doppler effect. Everything goes whirl, whirl, whirl. I think one of the first futurist composers, Luigi Russolo or something, an Italian futurist, he tried to make a kind of like pure machine instrument that was basically just like strobing car sound.
Oh, like early Music Concrete type shit.
Yeah, and there's like way more notes in this, right? There were a ton of notes in the guitar part, but the overall effect, especially when you add the whoa, whoa, whoa vocals in there, is just machines passing.
How's it going? Connor here from Oncology, and you're listening to Terminus.
And we are back from talking about how people are just gradually going crazy and losing it to review Ynkleudherhenavogyon with Honan Bleydh 2. Out now on Bandcamp by Inversolar Reqvriem, on tape by Analög Ragnarök, on LP by Urtod Void, and on CD by Dark Adversary. So that name that I couldn't pronounce is... It seems like it's LLN gibberish, but it is actually Cornish, which is a Celtic language that is close to Welsh. And it's a compound, meaning something like elder undertaker. I know this from the basically effectively liner notes or mini review that's been written by Rites of Pestilence, which is how I know this record came out. The Rites of Pestilence channel. This is from a scene that I've had my eyes on for a while. Probably a lot of you listeners know better than me. But this is the Inversolar Requiem. The spelling's a little weird, but I think we can just say Requiem. Inversolar Requiem scene from the UK, but specifically Cornwall. We've reviewed one other record from this scene, which is the Surtur Wounds. He put that out on Inversolar Requiem, but it wasn't one of the sort of central sort of Cornish bands on this label. And this, I've been sort of, I guess, waiting a while until one of the main bands puts something out at the right time for us to review it. And now is that time. I guess we could set the scene sort of for the music by talking about the location. So Cornwall is this long peninsula in the southwest of the main British Isle, it's in. Although Cornwall is a distinct region, whereas the Welsh have held out and have a bit of autonomy, Cornwall is basically English now. Although there's still some remains of the regional language and culture and whatnot. And so it's this peninsula, and it has unusually warm weather. So there are a lot of beaches and ports. It's big for shipping and vacations. It's warm enough that you can grow palm trees there sometimes, which is because of the currents, the particular way the currents go. And that gives it something eerie, right? It's sort of it's this kind of other world tethered to the British Isles. In terms of history, right, this was the last southern redoubt of the Britons, who were driven back there by the Saxons. There's actually a great bit about Cornwall in The Last Kingdom, although unfortunately it's not very kind to the Cornish, especially the TV staging, which, gives them the chump armor. They do that to everyone who's not in the Vikings. They have to have chump armor. So the Celts are sort of driven into the corner by the Saxons, but retain, Cornwall remains as an independent kingdom for a long time. And the Castle Tintagel, reputedly the birthplace of King Arthur, the Celtic champion against the Saxons, was in Cornwall. And then there's some weird stuff about the name. So the root in Cornwall is obviously sort of cornu, which is like horn, right? So the peninsula, right? We can call a peninsula a horn. And it's corn, and then whale, which is like the Saxon word for the British, right? Which is like Welsh. So you could call it the Horn or Peninsula of the Britons. But, if you want to just take the root words and compound them together, you could just come up with the sort of, just the term horned foreigner, right? Which would be the devil, or evokes, the Celtic god Cernunnos. And the band, this is pagan black metal through and through, but not necessarily of the kind that's normal these days. It is a very, this is a sort of especially grim and strange night-side paganism that is not, as far as I can tell, the anti-cosmic Germanic heathenism thing that is basically an offshoot of Orthodox black metal and is crypto-Christian. This is certainly seems in touch with the chthonic forces of the Celtic underworld, but also just with the gods and the spirits. The Rites of Pestilence makes a good point, is that on the cover, our cryptic protagonist is wielding the Alhaz inverted, the death rune, but also the Alhaz up, right, the life rune, right? And sort of partaking of celestial and chthonic forces together. But this notion of a kind of especially dark paganism that is not opposed to paganism, as the anti-cosmic stuff is very British in a way. So Eisensker, who we've reviewed, has that sort of nocturnal mushroom black metal. Instinct, that's a deep cut. And then even things in the industrial scene like Endura or Ten Horned Beast, who we've reviewed. And the record and in terms of within black metal, you can hear him drawing on some of those anti-cosmic pagan bands. I mean, I think the way he's styled himself clearly owes something to Arcanum, to Shamate.
I was thinking Arcanum, yeah.
Vulcanaz also. Although I don't know if Vulcanaz is anti-cosmic per se, but it has something to do with all that. Arcanum and Vulcanaz, but also with, so it has something to do with those things. And the overall mood of the record is maniacal witches' Sabbath vibes. It is really cool. Like the last record we reviewed, this is strange raw music that is extended for way longer than people are used to with the style. So where that was a brutal death record clocking 30 minutes, this is a sort of, in some sense, a minimalist raw black metal record clocking 50 minutes, which is astonishing. I love this. This is definitely like year-end for me, maybe high year-end. What do you make of a death metal guy?
This is like, I'm going to have to listen to it more, but this is potentially year-end for me, too.
Cool.
This is super fucking weird. We've covered a lot of sort of black heavy metal fusion stuff this year especially. And I think this is the first one that's like fully grabbed me because it's reincorporated a lot of sort of traditional heavy metal, or in this case even like Thin Lizzy stuff. But it doesn't feel like that softened the edges at all. If anything, it's just made it weirder and more alienating. I have this really weird idea about the record, where insofar as there's a problem with pagan black metal or pagan metal or heathenry, what have you, it's that a lot of the bands, or nearly all the bands in metal that trade in that sort of thing, position the listener sort of at the center of pagan antiquity, where it's like, we're drinking blood from the skulls of our enemies with our boys. We're at the center. If we are Vikings, we are in the middle of what Vikings do and what they are best known for. And that's cool and fun. But there's a suspicion that I have that maybe that's not exactly what black metal is meant to be. Black metal is maybe, no matter where it's supposed to be positioned, sort of on the fringes of wherever it is. And in this case, this is sort of like being on the fringe of a culture even in pagan antiquity. So he's not only taken the first step of, like, understanding paganism as it actually is, which is, like, we would perceive it as radically amoral and kind of insane in certain ways, but then this band positions itself... Cool. Of course. Yeah. But this band positions
just
itself...
clarifying for the listeners.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah. I'm a Catholic, but I'm open-minded. This positions itself at the edge of that. Like you were saying, it's like maniacal witches' Sabbath. It's like, okay, there's a pagan religion that your village is into, and you're practicing a really fucked up, disorganized version of it. That is like half weird interpretations of folktales and half like pure delusion on your part. I find that fascinating. I love the idea of sort of taking these like simple black metal concepts of like alienation and rage and isolation and resentment and dropping them in that period of antiquity. So where other black metal bands suggest, oh, wouldn't it be sick to go back and be a Viking? This posits, hey, if you went back in time and you were in one of these societies, you wouldn't be at the center of it. You wouldn't be a regular guy. You'd be a fucking weirdo there too. Which is just a really interesting way to execute a black metal record, and one that sort of makes intuitive sense. It's like, yeah, we're not just like a guy in this era. We're the like fucked up shaman that most of the people in the village don't even want to talk to. And that's really cool.
I'm glad you came around to that, because that's what I was going to say. This is, in the way that it does this, it's like a lot of just the best pagan black metal. I think the tendency you're describing is
you wrote in the notes that you wanted to like clarify. Yeah, this is not me approaching anywhere near people saying black metal's about individualism. It's fucking not. But I think that it's not about carving your own path. It's about not being a part of something or being on the edges of it. And I think there's ways to do that in many different forms.
Right, I get that. That makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, I think part of what you're also getting at is the distinction between, say... So, I mean, the thread that we're weaving, right, it's like the... I could talk about this for too long, and it's very late at night for you, so we should... I don't want to do this too long, but I guess the... People, there's the sort of idea in some of the how do I want to approach this? Now, I've been thinking about it all day, and now my brain's fucking broken. But like, basically, with the real pagan black metal, it fixates on stuff that in paganism was marginal and weird. So, like, although a bunch of pagan pagan metal bands or whatever talk about Odin or whatever, the god Odin was a god almost nobody worshipped intensively as a personal god, because he was a god for aristocratic warriors and wizards. And he was associated with being a fucking psycho, right? Sacrificing yourself to yourself for increased power, right? Increased power and knowledge, right? For with war for its own sake and conquest and things like this, right? He was, and his devotees, like berserkers or whatever, were like antisocial, or were cross-dressing shamans on the edge of town, who were sort of, and some of those people often those people held great power in the culture, but they were sort of the exception that confirms the rule. It was like the outside, the power outside the walls, at the center of the walls, holding it together. And that's something that, like, the best the best pagan BM gets. I think like the weirdest Graveland shit, like 1,000 Swords, totally gets that. Or Treldom does that really well. But then stuff that's become very popular now that we think of as pagan black metal or whatever, like Absurd or Goat Moon or whatever, or even Bilskirnir, it's very much like you're in it with your boys.
Yeah.
Right? And even though they're talking about Odin or whatever, the mood is very much often more like Tyr or Thor or whatever.
Yeah.
And that sort of, that might be pagan metal, and it can be really good, but the aspect of the marginal or the exceptional or the antisocial, right, that's essential to black metal maybe isn't there so much. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
No, I fully agree.
It's like, to be pagan black metal, it has to not just be pagan, it has to be fucking bizarre. It has to have this sort of current of, it has to have both the king and the outlaw impulse.
Yeah. Well, you in short, like, while it can be cool to do music about it, black metal is probably fundamentally not about hanging with your dogs on the battlefield. You know, it's fun, but it's not really, I think, central to it.
No, the stuff that's really about that is not really black metal. Right? It's it's like, you know, the term pagan metal is fine and refers to many, many good kinds of things, and you can see pagan metal coming right out of black metal. But if there's something about the mood, it's black metal places itself at a distance. Yes. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
So let's listen to weird tunes.
Yeah, so I guess I'll make an overall statement and then immediately play two samples that sort of undermine it. Or not undermine it, but like, basically one thing that makes this record so good is the serious long-form composition happening in riff, underground black metal songs. There is a lot of the songs initiate ideas that come to fruition much later, or introduce genuine mid-song transformations that lead to unexpected places. That said, none of that would be interesting if there weren't a foundation in riff A, riff B, riff A, riff B, riff C. And the core action riffing on this record is incredibly solid. Not just solid, just really powerful and economic. And a lot of it's derived, although we've name-checked all these, these cosmic, these sort of darker pagan BM bands, a lot of the riffing style on this record really is coming from Slav stuff. Blazeberthal, Graveland, Ukraine, Astrophase and Druidkin, whatnot. But really often from the weirdest bands working that vein after those original Slavic bands. And you're going to hear some of that now in Guav Neskar. And to get that core riffing, I'm just going to sample the first 2 minutes of the song.
very, very strange angles.
Yeah, these are, yes.
But I can see how it relates, like, in this very strange way to, like, Roman Sanko stuff.
Absolutely. So the first band you might mention, like Slav riffs, these sort of like broad chords, sometimes with these sort of like trilling high strings going, and in sort of these sort of mixed sort of bright major harmonies with like strange dissonance or whatever, right? Like, you can hear how that's like a Ukrainian thing. Some of those melodies there, especially the more bold power chordy one in the middle, really sound like Astrophase, whatever, which is
definitely
notes.
because he's using the chord shapes are so weird, and he's using these very bright, almost major figures. Like, I was actually thinking of like Autumn Aurora by Druidka. Just because it's like Autumn Aurora is a record that you think should sound a lot sort of like more chilled out and sunny and nice than it is, but it's actually like fraught with all this weird tension.
And it's really aggro. Like, the cover is almost wrong for Auto. Yeah. So Astrophase or early Druk, basically. However, there's a the folkiness here is much more in the background, right? Astrophase and Druk, you can be like, okay, that's a folk melody. Here, the intervals are even weirder and more tense, and that's where Yellow Eyes comes in. Right? Yellow Eyes, the NYC art black band that gets a pass, and they've listened really seriously to the Ukrainian stuff, but bent it in all sorts of bizarre, Krallis-y ways. And you can hear that here, not just in the trem chords, but I think especially in the skronky arpeggio in the middle of the passage.
I mean, Krallis and, like, Colin Marston stuff in general wouldn't be totally amiss as, like, a point of comparison here.
I think you're right on that initial riff.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very Krallis-y thing to do. Just the Krallis, much simpler.
Well, yeah, Krallis was also very, very influenced by the Slavs. But there's some other things going on here compositionally. So, although there's this sort of flashy moment in the middle with the skronky arpeggios, what's going on here underneath is just extraordinarily rigorous drone composition. Every single riff is a variation on the same melodic phrase. Da, 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 da. At the end, where the sample comes out, it sounds like he's gone back to the riff at the beginning of the sample. It's not. It's slightly mutated. Each one, I think eventually in the song he does go back to the riff that starts the song, but only at the very end. The song builds to a really powerful, properly triumphant, that's a place where I will use that word, triumphant sort of climax, big, broad Dorian intervals, claw fist moment, and then he just replays the beginning of the song. But that particular melody and the way he's reworking it and all, it reminds me of another regional scene with unpronounceable names, which is the Basques. And they're also really responding to the Slav bands. And Upstarts, especially, has this blend of very difficult, angular, sort of mountainous chording that's being played, nevertheless, with this hazy, atmospheric vibe, and then will just sort of shift into powerful, stern, and sort of satisfyingly resolved riffs. And even to say that, it's like, I just described black metal, you know what I mean?
No, but like, I get what you're saying.
A lot of things about this record, to describe what he does so well, I end up just describing black metal. This is, although this seems to be a niche exercise in an eccentric sort of marginal idiom.
Yeah,
this is down the line a brilliant black metal record that just does, to explain why it's good, you have to be like, here's why I like black metal.
Well, yeah, it's an exact modern counterpoint to the Samain record.
Yeah, the Semaine record. Yeah, absolutely. This is like the Semaine record, too. Yeah. For listeners who aren't familiar, it's Samain, which is a Australian Irish barbarian warrior record, which is also extremely weird and shamanic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same weird, fringy relationship with a pagan culture. I don't think people were typically ejaculating on their swords, but in Samain they do.
I'm glad you. I was going to say it if you didn't. Yes.
That's like the most memorable thing. It's a really good record, but the most memorable thing is just the pure psychosis of some of the fucking lyrics. Like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah. It's like, I ejaculate on my blade before battle, and it's. Yeah, man. So this is deranged in a very similar way. Deranged but fundamental. And yeah, so other things I can't stop thinking of when listening to this record, sort of speaking of deranged, Moonblood. There's a component of this record that is very stompy. And some of that stompy stuff, or I think a lot of it, and some of the bizarre, blown-out, deep vocals, is coming from the Yorkshire scene in the UK, like white metal.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I can definitely see a relationship there.
But there's other stuff that, the German stuff like Moonblood, or even some other German stuff. I'll play the sample first, and then I want to do a comparison. So let's do... Men Groan Logel. Also, just the beginning of the song, because they're that, yeah. Fade out on that absolutely sick riff. To talk more about the moonlit stomping earlier in that track. So, although that can remind you of, fill in whatever one punkish 1-2 beat pagan black metal band you want, and it is like that. I think it's also got a lot to do with stuff that's much older. And this, and specifically like thrash, what a lot of that is especially after the first riff, when the double bass enters, you can hear, and the melody becomes a lot more dissonant. You start to get this sort of like sort of a thrash riff, but much more melodic, a lot more melodic shape in it, and a lot of weird folky bends and things being done in this sort of hyper syncopated way under a thrash beat that's unusually slow. And again, just this, absolutely mad dancing around the Sabbath fires vibe, the night on the Brocken. And it reminds me of what may be the first second wave black metal song ever, Death Trap by Destruction.
The vocal performance on this unpronounceable band's record is really fucking gorked and cool, too. I did want to bring up a special note of it. The vocals on this are completely insane.
It is to modern black metal what Destruction was to, normal people music in the 80s.
So, continuing on the thrash thread, I don't know if you get any of this vibe, but a lot of this kind of sounds like it has some of the vibes of Absu, but applied to music I actually want to listen to. There's flickers in Absu of something just as gorked and sociopathic as this.
No, yeah.
Yeah, it's the whole vibe that Prescriptor brings is awesome. I just can't stand the music. But that thread of thrash, or really, I mean, a lot of this is kind of 1.5 wave, Tormentor type shit. Moonblood, I can see. I never got that into Moonblood myself. It was one of those bands where all the talk I heard about them didn't match up with what I imagined in my head after actually hearing it. But I definitely get that. This sort of rough-hewn, deeply violent and pagan, still very heavy metal, black metal. But I'd also like to say that on that second sample you put on Men Grow on Logo, it's the stomp riff is it's bizarre. The interval choices in the stomp riff are wrong. There's a way to take that rhythm and make a riff that is perfectly contiguous with absurd, etc. And he absolutely doesn't do that. He uses a really big, wide interval that's swinging a little bit too fast for its own good, and it is authentically pagan, but it's also authentically unhinged. That crazy Witches Sabbath thing you were talking about. It's a cool way to deliver heavy metal kicks without compromising the sort of aesthetic integrity of the whole unit.
Yeah, that makes sense. Their melody, the intervals, it is I get what you mean. It has the same function as the muscular, noble, absurd riff, and it is muscular and noble, but just also deezed and on mushrooms. Yeah, sort of frothing at the mouth. I hear what you mean. It's you know what it is? It's the intervals are so broad and almost pentatonic that they sound more like a heavy metal riff that you should be drawing out to twice the length, right? Mm-hmm. Like the interval choice is like the Destruction song, kind of, you know? But yeah, I think I get what you mean. It sounds more ancient by not sounding folky in the way that Absurd sounds folky.
Yeah, I like how this record, despite being a pagan black metal record, actually sort of, to me at least, rarely sounds folky in the way we think of it.
Yeah.
There aren't really a lot of gestures toward, like, basic folk standard melodies from the Isles, or at least not ones that I'm in touch with. Maybe there's stuff that's just so old I'm completely unfamiliar with it. Mm-hmm. But this sounds like a very pure interpretation of what those things might sound like through the lens of sort of heavy black metal. So I've got a sample here. I think I'm just going to do one sample just because it's like, this is a record you really need to hear for yourself. It's long and there's a lot of variation on it, and trying to pick something truly representative is kind of impossible because a lot of weird shit happens across this that we haven't even like really touched on. And it's awesome, but I kind of like leaving those as surprises to the listener. But let's go to one of my favorite tracks, which is Carnbre Bora, which has, I think, my favorite riffs. You pointed out Bleydh Hall as being essential to this, which it is, but not necessarily in the way people imagine it. Bleydh Hall contains a lot more than people think, because a lot of people, you know, will listen to Bleydh Hall, and what are they immediately attracted to? Like late Branacald and mid-era forest, which is sort of objectively the most accessible stuff within Bleydh Hall. Don't get me wrong, those are my favorite parts of Bleydh Hall, too. I basically like it all, but I like the big ones. It's the same reason Hammerheart's my favorite Bathory album, because it's the best one. But what this project seems really interested in is the earliest stuff by Bleydh Hall. You know, Stormheight by Branacald, the self-titled Forest debut. And by the way, outside of like the House of First Light guys, nobody's listening to those records. You can try
I am.
You are. But you're like an insane person with a metal podcast. People don't fucking do that. Like, people don't listen to Stormheight. I know you've got friends out there who say, oh, yeah, I listen to Stormheight all the time. No, you fucking don't. It's like in mono. You, like, only hear it out of the left channel of your stereo because it's fucked up. And they, like, recorded it. It's like, and it barely, it's so crackly, it barely sounds like music. It's fucking awesome, but I don't listen to that on a regular basis. Or the first Forest record, which is like, I remember I got you to listen to that. I was like, you're gonna love this one because it's like, it's got the things you know from Forest, but through a filter of Ildjarn, and it actually ends up sounding what I always imagined Ildjarn was supposed to sound like. It's the first Forest record.
Oh my god, the second track, The Flames and the Ash Before the Horizons Opened Wide, is, I think, the ultimate Bleydh banger. It's the song that plays in my head at every moment of just sort of peak strain and triumph. It's nuts. And there are parts on this record that sound like that.
Yes, there are. And let's listen to a part that is perhaps on the record one of the most definitively BBH. So the guy behind this project might be the only one who actually knows how to write fucking forest riffs. Everybody at this point has attempted to knock off like the BBH style of riffcraft. A lot of them do cool stuff, but basically none of them do it right. Because everyone's paying attention to... Nobody pays attention to, like, the last couple notes in a forest riff. They like that take like the epic landscape melody and immediately like make it darker and more aggressive. I have tried to write forest riffs. I'm not capable of it because my brain is poisoned by metalcore and shit. I can't fucking write anything that emotionally complicated. I'm just sad or I'm angry. This guy knows how to do it, how to take these elongated, droning passages and infuse them with, like, a complex emotional texture, wherein triumph and a sort of, like, fearful darkness coexist, and as you're going to immediately say, they cannot exist without each other because they are fundamentally related. I'm going to scoop you right there.
Keep going.
So... this guy is, the BBH thing is crucial to this, but I wouldn't even say that it's foremost on the record. So what does it mean when a guy is able to take one of the secondary influences and recreate their processes better than almost anybody?